Hey guys, welcome back to the special Halloween Creepypasta Scary Story episode of the Dead Batteries podcast. I'm Dutchman.
And I'm Jay. I'm very excited about this episode. I'm very excited about this one.
Jackson 5.
What? What? My daddy didn't beat me for music. What are you talking about?
Ooh. Goodness.
Oh,
No, you make it sound so dirty. You make it sound so.
Look, bro, I don't got a
It
buddy
was
named
doo-doo
Tito,
feces all over the walls.
bro. Oh my God, Tito, calm down, bro. Calm down, Tito.
You sure about that?
Ooh.
Maybe I'll just read all these. Maybe I'll just read all these stories in the Michael Jackson voice.
Please, that'll be extra scary. If there's any of them with children, I'm terrified already.
I think there might be one. I don't know. We'll find out.
You
All
sure
right.
will, Michael.
All right, we ready?
Yeah.
Intro's over. We got to get moving.
All right, let's go.
All right. I found a letter from my stalker, written by Minister of Owls, I'm sorry. I found this note nailed onto a tree in my front lawn. I really don't know how to describe it. I'll just let you read it yourself. I saw you today. It was your birthday. You didn't see me. You hardly ever do these days. Your skin looks so nice and healthy. Your eyes, they were the most beautiful I'd ever seen them. You've grown so much. I remember how different you used to look when you were younger. I remember the day I first met you. It was 4 years ago. I was sitting at my desk, head down, listening to the teacher rattling off names for attendance. The teacher called out a name I didn't recognize, and a stranger's voice answered behind me. Was there a new student? The teacher didn't pause for a second, just continued calling out name after name. I turned my head to where the voice had come from. I saw you, a pale thing, so thin, your eyes so red, at a seat that should have been empty. I saw the fireflies dancing, flying around you, flickering, dozens of them, never straying far from you. I saw them going through you and coming out through your skin, like you were a mist to them. Can you believe I thought you were a ghost? No one else seemed to acknowledge the new stranger sitting at the back of the class. Class after class, hour after hour passed as I waited for something to happen. For someone to notice you. For you to leave. For you to let out a ghoulish scream and claw at me like in the horror story I was certain I was in. But nothing happened. Teachers came and went. My classmates laughed and slept. And you just sat there. The bell rang for recess. The other kids ran to their mundanities for the day, leaving me and you together in the empty classroom. You stood up and pulled a chair from the desk next to you, making it face your desk. You turned your head to me and spoke. Well, you're slow today. Come on, ask me your questions. I don't know why I didn't run away screaming at that moment. Probably would have turned out better for me in the long run, but let's not speculate. I guess at that point in my life, I was pretty bloody lonely. I figured there was only a 50-50 chance you'd eat me, and the other 50 was that someone wanted to talk with me. Kid priorities didn't make sense to me either these days. So I went along with the flow. I walked over to your desk, sat down on the chair you pulled for me, and asked my question. What were you? You told me you didn't know. You said that once you were a child, just like me, with parents and friends. You used to go to the same schools as me. Then, one day, one ordinary day, when you were 10, you just woke up and you were like this, covered in fireflies, and no one could remember you the moment they concentrated on anything else. No one, not even your parents. You told me of how I'd notice you every day, how I'd think of you until recess every day, how I'd come to you every day, how we would talk every day, how we would meet for the first time every day for the last 3 years. about how I'd forget the instant I walked out of the room, how everyone would forget you, how the fireflies would make them, how for the last 3 years you'd been alone. Your story was so very hard to believe, so I didn't. I asked what reality prank show I was on. You looked, well, unimpressed, and asked me to continue telling my story. I was caught off guard by the non sequitur. You said last time I was here, I was telling you a story, a horror story about a haunted house. As you detailed the story, goosebumps prickled my skin. It was a story I had been making up in my head, a story I hadn't told anyone yet. At that moment, a million reactions were open to me, all simultaneously adequate and inadequate. But the only thing that seemed proper was to finish the story for you, so I did. Halfway through, you interrupted me to ask if my mother had recovered from her sickness yet. I had to shake my head, a bit ashamed of the fact that I shared this private matter to a stranger. The story ended a few minutes before recess. My next class was in another room. You told me to go. Your steadiness took me back. You seemed so accepting of your fate, like you'd already gotten used to the idea of being forgotten forever. I was a kid back then. I wasn't a particularly smart kid, and I was probably on the onset of a crush. So you can excuse what I did next as an example of my childhood stupidity. I grabbed my scissors, pressed it against my arm's skin, and dug in. As it drew blood, I pushed it forwards, till the cut formed the shape I wanted. Letter by letter, I carved your name onto my arm. Just so you know, I don't regret that. Don't get me wrong, kid power might have made me do it, but it sure as hell didn't make the pain go away. It was one of the most painful experiences of my life. But even then, as a kid, I thought what was happening to you was unfair. I remember how your eyes looked when you saw that, the confusion, how strange it was for you that anyone would want to remember. I remember that look so clearly. When I woke up the next day and saw your name on my arm, I remembered you. I didn't forget. That day, for the first time, we had a conversation that wasn't so one-sided. You said no one had ever done anything like that before and suggested I might have a mental illness. I won't deny it. That drew a little blood. As we talked, a creeping thought came into my head. Did you prefer it when I didn't remember? That night, I was sitting up on my bed, staring at your name on my arm, wondering if I should cover it up so I couldn't see it and give you back your privacy, when I heard a crash. I looked up to see my bedroom window shattered and a dirty rock on my floor. I looked out of the cracked window to see a dark figure on my lawn. You were outside yelling about how we should hang out. It took me a while to get used to how bad you were at talking to people. Years without practice made you quite a bit rusty. That was all right. We had a lot of time. For the next 2 years, we spent most of our free time together. Most of the time, we talked. You told me an aspect of your life and how you lived. You still stayed in your old house. Your parents never noticed the food that had gone missing, never noticed the extra room, or that you'd stolen the extra keys. One night, I confided in you that I was beginning to think you were a part of my imagination, Fight Club style. After all, what could you do to me that I couldn't do to myself? You spent the next month or so trying to leave bite marks on my ear or neck to prove a point. I still have a few scars on my ear, so I guess you did. Looking back, I could see the warning signs even then. Your skin seemed to get worse and worse, paler and paler, and you'd rubbed your eyes raw. It was in winter we had our wake-up call. The morning began like any other. I woke up, brushed my teeth, and started searching for clothes to wear. It was a winter morning, and my room was dark, so I didn't see your name on my arm. The cold sent shivers through my body, and I pulled out a long-sleeved jacket. A small bell rang in my head. Don't you usually roll your sleeves up? Yeah, and why did I? That was annoying. I finished tidying up and headed to school. On the school bus, I felt oddly content, like something I'd just been worrying about had just disappeared. I walked up the school stairs, down the hall, through the classroom door, and sat down at my desk. The same feeling of a burden forgotten hounded my mind. What was I forgetting? When recess came, I just sat at my desk while my classmates ran out. It felt like a ritual, but I didn't know what for. I was contemplating just walking out to join them when I heard it. It was something small in the wind, like a whisper, but it came over and over, incessant. It sounded like my name. I knew this was strange, but this was worth my attention. But I felt oddly calm. Everything would be all right. Everything would be fine. Just ignore it. I sat there at my desk, my mind a war zone between two conflicting, contradictory voices, when I felt a force tugging at my sleeve. The moment I noticed this, my jacket sleeve tore open. I saw your name on my arm, and then your hand that had ripped my jacket open. You'd been yelling at me for over 20 minutes. I think that was the moment we realized how on edge our friendship really was. One accident away from complete erasure. We spent most of the next year in the town library together, trying to find out what the fireflies were. It wasn't really a problem for me because of my mother's treatment. My family couldn't afford to go on any trips, so our house didn't have heating anymore. So I was happy to spend my time with you. Trying to find information was a puzzle in and of itself. After all, how would I read about people I couldn't remember, and how would you find out who was special when no one could even remember enough about them to record them? We found our old family trees and records. Individually, we'd write down the name of everyone in the book on 2 lists, and then we would compare. The names I hadn't remembered to write down, but you had, would become the focus. They were the names of who were under the curse of the fireflies. We compiled a list of suspicious books we thought could help us, because they were written by or were about the people we were searching for. I read the books, with the list of names side by side, reading it again for every page of the book. You scoured the internet on the library computers, on the lookout for articles about the people. Our search would lead us to the first glimpse we got of what was really happening to you. It was late at night when you found the picture. I was a bit drowsy at the time, and almost about to nod off when I heard a sharp intake of breath. I turned to see you standing up, pointing at the screen. I didn't see anything. Well, anything noteworthy. On the screen was a picture of a clearing somewhere in the woods. You held up your piece of paper where you'd marked out 2 names. Sussy Appleby Reagan, 13. Terry Appleby Reagan, 12. Siblings. For a moment I saw the paper and the screen side by side, and then I saw them. 2 figures emerging from the woods towards the camera. They were almost humanoid, with the exception of their limbs, which stretched to nightmarish proportions. Their blank, white skin was that of a pure albino, and looked more like tree bark than anything you expected to find on a mammal. A cloud of fireflies surrounded the duo. The shorter one looked emaciated. I could see their rib cages, on which their eyes. God, their eyes! So small, so red. The taller one, with its white hair, didn't look alive anymore. They were little more than skin wrapped around a skeleton. Fireflies swarmed out of the pair's empty eye sockets. Both reached for the cameraman. I looked at the article surrounding the picture. It was a blog posted by a hiker, 20 years after the last mention of the 2 kids. The picture was a mystery to the cameraman as well. He'd been wanting to go to the woods pictured for a while now, but he never actually remembered going there. The picture had just appeared on his camera one day, out of the blue. For a moment I looked at your face. Your thin, pale face with those red veined eyes. Would that be you when my scar faded? Just a walking horror I'd glimpse, then forget? We worked through our reading list at a much faster pace starting from that moment. Maybe we should have gone slower. At least every book, every website we'd left untouched promised hope. The books that we'd finished and tossed aside promised nothing but the clearing in the woods as one's future. And we tossed aside a lot of books. I believe I tore through 3/4 of my reading list before I stumbled across the journal. Oh God, that horrible, horrible journal. The journal used to belong to a mental patient named Joey, who claimed to be a serial killer. He was locked up in an asylum when the police discovered his supposed victims never existed. He was diagnosed with a need for attention and shoved away. They should have electrocuted him. They should have fried him until his flesh melted and his hair burned. In the journal, he talked about how he carried out his killings. He knew things, bizarre and disturbing things no one else knew. He knew of strange creatures that lived in the woods. Of them, his favorites were the fireflies. I'm not going to tell you how he summoned these things. I trust you. I trust you more than anyone. But a thing like this belongs to the ground more than it ever will to the human mind. In the end, it's sufficient to know that these things were not fireflies. Joey would start his ritual by taking a kid, anyone he pleased. He could take them at any time, in the dead of night from their own homes, or in broad daylight from their front yards. It didn't matter if he was seen. He'd take them to his house and drag them inside. Usually, an Amber Alert came up at that point. He didn't care. Like I said, it wouldn't matter soon. He dragged them to a special room in his house. Here, the fireflies would come to latch onto them. Now, nobody was searching for the kids. Not the police, not the parents, nobody. From then on, he could do whatever he wanted to the kid. He'd get bored of them after a day or two, after the child had broken. At that point, he disposed of them. Hacksaw, kitchen knife, anything would work. He detailed a large pit of bodies he kept in the woods, swarming with bugs. One day, I guess he got bored of that too, so he went right to the police station and turned himself in. Not on account of guilt, no. He just wanted someone to know about the stuff he was doing. Sick bastard. Oh, don't get the wrong idea. He never stopped killing kids. The asylum doors didn't stop him from doing what he liked. It just made him improvise. He made a new way. He modified the flies so they could survive without a host, just in a dormant state. When a child, he specified the age, would approach the swarm, it would latch on and begin its effect. Over the years, the child would warp horribly into the things we saw in the woods. I wish I could hate him in peace. I wish I could say the world owed him nothing, but that wouldn't be true. He detailed a way out. On the final page, there was an exact explanation on how to get rid of the fireflies. You must have seen something in my face, because at that moment, you asked if I had found anything. I said no and closed the book. A few minutes later, you shut down the computer. You picked up the last book and went through it yourself. When you reached the end cover, you tossed it aside. I asked what we should do now. You said it was all right. I could go home. We'd talk about it in the morning. I stood up and walked past the shelves of books, headed for the library entrance, but stopped right outside the door and waited. I waited until I heard the sniffling sounds. I sneaked back to our table, where you were quietly sobbing. You had your head in your hands. I sat back down as you raised your eyes to me. You said you'd wish you'd never met me. How happy you were when you had nothing to lose. How I ruined your life. You never really gotten better at talking to people. That was the worst love confession I'd ever heard. I remember how we kissed that night. I remember your hands gripping my hair. I remember that kiss. I wish it could have just been a kiss. I'm sorry I ruined that moment. When my arms were around you, I was close enough to steal a firefly without you noticing. I remember holding the firefly in my hand. I remember how it struggled. Until it didn't. Until it was a part of me. The firefly shifted. They came over to me and left you. I remember the familiar look in your eyes, the confusion. I never wanted to see that confusion in your eyes again. You deserved to be loved, and you deserved to know that. I wasn't really living anyway. You reached for me. I pulled away. As the last lights of recognition faded from your eyes, and then you were just staring at a stranger, walking away into a crowd of strangers. That was a year ago. You've gotten so much better since then. You have so many friends now, so many people at your birthday party. You also look so much healthier. I haven't been as fortunate. My skin's gotten paler, and my eyes hurt all the time now. I couldn't go into school like you did all those years. I haven't wasted my time, though. I found Joey's pit. The bodies. There were so many bodies. There's a grave for those children now. Without me, my mom could afford her surgery. She looked so happy. Just yesterday, I saw her playing with my baby brother. I saw you yesterday, crying. You were with your friends, laughing. For a brief moment, your eyes met mine, and then they were so wet. I think I'm going away. For good, I think. You're not going to be happy if I stick around. I'm so happy I met you, even if you don't remember me. Sometimes I go through depressive episodes. I feel so lonely, even with my friends. I don't know what's going through my head during these times, and sometimes I'd end up in a bathtub, a knife in my hands and my wrists bleeding. Until now, I thought I was cutting my wrists. I wasn't. The cuts, they're letters. I've been carving a name onto my arm.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Wow, that was good. The Russian Sleep Experiment, a creepypasta story. Author unknown. Russian researchers in the late 1940s kept 5 people awake for 15 days using an experimental gas-based stimulant. They were kept in a sealed environment to carefully monitor their oxygen intake so the gas didn't kill them, since it was toxic in high concentrations. This was before the closed-circuit cameras, so they only had microphones and a 5-inch thick glass porthole-sized window into the chamber to monitor them. The chamber was stocked with books, cots to sleep in, but no bedding, running water and toilets, and enough dried food to last all 5 of them over a month. The test subjects were political prisoners deemed enemies of the state during World War II. Everything was fine for the first 5 days. The subject hardly complained, having been promised, falsely, that they would be freed if they submitted to the test and did not sleep for the 30 days. Their conventions and activities were monitored, and it was noted that they continued to talk about increasingly traumatic incidents in their past, and the general tone of their conversations took a darker aspect after the 4-day mark. After 5 days, they started to complain about the circumstances and events that led them to where they were, and started to demonstrate severe paranoia. They stopped talking to each other and began alternatively whispering to the microphones and one-way mirrored portholes. Oddly, they all seemed to think they could win the trust of the experimenters by turning over their comrades, the other subjects in captivities with them. At first, the researchers suspected this was an effect of the gas itself. After 9 days, the first of them started screaming. He ran the length of the chamber, repeatedly yelling at the top of his lungs for 3 hours straight. He continued attempting to scream, but was only able to produce occasional squeaks. The researchers postulated that he had physically torn his vocal cords. The most surprising thing about this behavior is how the others captive reacted to it, or rather, didn't react to it. They continued whispering to the microphone until the second of the captives started to scream. The 2 non-screaming captives took the books apart, smeared pages after pages of their own feces, and pasted them calmly over the glass porthole. The screaming promptly stopped. So did the whispering to the microphone. After 3 more days passed, the researchers checked the microphone hourly to make sure they were working, since they thought it was impossible that no sound could be coming with 5 people inside. The oxygen consumption in the chambers indicated that all 5 of the men were still alive. In fact, it was the amount of oxygen 5 people would consume at a very high level of strenuous exercise. On the morning of the 14th day, the researchers did something they said they would not do to get a reaction from the captives. They used the intercom inside the chamber, hoping to provoke any response from the captives they were afraid were either dead or vegetables. They announced, "We are opening the chamber to test the microphones. Step away from the door and lie flat on the floor or you will be shot. Compliance will earn one of you your immediate freedom." To their surprise, they heard a single phrase in a calm voice respond, "We no longer want to be freed." Debate broke amongst the researchers and the military forces funding the research. Unable to provoke any more responses from the intercom, it was finally decided to open the chambers at midnight on the 15th day. The chamber was flushed off the stimulants gases and filled with fresh air, and immediately voices from the microphone began to object. 3 different voices began begging, as if pleading for their life of the loved ones, and turn the gas back on. The chamber was opened, and soldiers sent in to retrieve the test subjects. They began to scream louder than ever, and so did the soldiers when they saw what was inside. 4 of the 5 subjects were still alive, although no one can rightly call their state of being as alive. The food rations past 5 days had not been so much as touched. They were chunks of meat from the dead test subject, thighs and chest stuffed into the drain center of the chambers, blocking the drain and allowing 4 inches of water to accumulate on the floor. Precisely how much water was on the floor was actually blood was never determined. All 4 surviving test subjects had also had a large portion of muscles and skin torn away from their bodies. The destruction of flesh and exposed bones of their fingertips indicated that the wounds were infected by hand, not with teeth, as the researchers initially thought. Closer examination of the position and angles of the wounds indicated most of, if not all, were self-inflicted. The abdominal organs below the ribcage of all 4 test subjects had been removed, while the heart, lungs, and diaphragm remained in place. The skin and most of the muscles attached to the ribs had been ripped off, exposing the lungs through the ribcage. All the blood vessels and organs remained intact. They had just been taken out of and laid on the floor. Fanning around the floor, but still living bodies of the subject, the digestive tract of all 4 could still be seen working, digesting food. It quickly became apparent that what they were digesting was their own flesh that they had ripped off and eaten over the course of the days. Most of the soldiers were Russian special operatives of the facilities, but still many refused to return to chambers to remove the test subjects. They continued to scream to be left in the chamber and alternately begged and demanded for the gas to be turned back on, lest they fall asleep. To everyone's surprise, the test subjects put up a fierce fight in the process of being removed from the chambers. One of the Russian soldiers died from having his throat ripped out. Another was gravely injured by having his testicles ripped off and an artery on his leg severed by one of the test subject's teeth. Another 5 of the soldiers lost their lives, if you count ones that committed suicide in the weeks following the incident. In the struggle, one of the 4 living subjects had his spleen ruptured, and he bled out almost immediately. The medical research attempted to sedate him, but this is proven to be impossible. He was injected with more than 10 times the human dose of morphine derivatives and still fought like a cornered animal, breaking the ribcage and the arms of one of the doctors. When heart was seen to beat for a full 2 minutes after he had bled out to the point where there were more airs in his vascular systems than blood, even after it stopped, he continued to scream and flail for another 3 minutes, struggling to attack anyone in reach, and just repeated the words "more" over and over, weaker and weaker, until he finally fell silent. The surviving 3 subjects were heavily restrained and moved into a medical facility. The 2 with intact vocal cords continually begged for the gas, demanding to be kept awake. The most injured of the 3 was taken to the only surgical operation units in the facility. In the process of preparing the subject to have his organs placed back within his body, it was found that he was effectively immune to any sedatives they had given him to prepare him for the surgery. He fought furiously against the restraints, and the anesthetic gas was brought out to put him under. He managed to tear most of the way through a 4-inch wide leather strap on his wrist. Even though the weight of the 200-pound soldiers were holding the wrist as well. It took only a little more than anesthetics than normal to put him under, and the instant his eyelids fluttered and closed, his heart stopped. In the autopsy of the test, the subject died on the operating table. It was found out that his blood had triple the normal level of oxygen. His muscles were still attached to his skeleton, were badly torn, and it had broken 9 bones in his struggle to not be subdued. Most of them were from the forces of his own muscles and the effort he exerted from them. The second survivor had been the first on the group of the 5 to start screaming. His vocal cords destroyed, he was unable to beg or object to the surgery. He's only reacted by shaking his head violently in disapproval when the anesthetic gas was brought near him. He shook his head, yes, when someone suggested reluctantly that they try the surgery without anesthetics, and did not react for the entire 6-hour procedures of replacing his abdominal organs and attempting to cover them with what remained of his skin. The surgeon presiding stated repeatedly that it should be medically possible for the patient to still be alive. One terrified nurse who assisted in the surgery stated that she had not seen a patient mouth curl into a smile several times whenever his eyes met hers. When the surgery ended, the subject looked at the surgeon and began to wheeze loudly, attempting to keep talking while struggling. Assuming this must be something of a drastic importance, the surgeon had a pen and pad fetched so the patient could write his message. It was simply, "Keep cutting." The other 2 test subjects were given the same surgery, both without anesthetic as well. Although they had been injected with a paralytic for the duration of the operation, the surgeon found it was impossible to perform an operation while the patient laughed continuously. Once paralyzed, the subject could only follow the attendance researchers with their eyes. The paralytic cleared their immune system in an abnormally short period of time, and they were soon trying to escape their bonds. The moment they could speak, they were again asking for the stimulant gas. The researchers tried asking why they had injured themselves, why they had ripped their own guts, and they wanted to be given the gas again. Their only response was, "I must remain awake." All 3 subjects restrained were reinforced, and they were placed back into chambers, awaiting determination as to what they should do with them. The researchers, facing the wrath of the military's benefactors for having failed the stated goal of their project, considered euthanizing the surviving subjects. The commanding officer, a former KGB agent, instead saw potential and wanted to see what would happen if they were put back on the gas. The researchers strongly objected, but were overruled. In the preparation for being sealed in the chambers, the subjects were connected to an EEG monitor, and they had their restraints padded for long-term confinement. To everyone's surprise, all 3 stopped struggling the moment it was let slip that they were going back to the gas. It was obvious that at this point all 3 of them were putting up a great struggle to stay awake. One of the subjects could speak was humming loudly and continuously. The mute subject was straining his legs against the leather bond with all his might, first left, then right, then left again, for something to focus on. The remaining subject was holding his head off his pillow and blinking rapidly. Having been the first to be wired to EEG, most of the researchers were monitoring his brainwaves in surprise. They were normal most of the time, but sometimes flatlined inexplicably. It looked as if they were repeatedly suffering from brain death before returning to normal. As they focused on paper scrolling out of their brainwaves monitor, only one of the nurses saw his eyes slip shut. For in the same moment his head hit the pillow. His brainwave immediately changed to that of deep sleep, then flattened for the last time as his heart simultaneously stopped. The only remaining subject that could speak started screaming to be sealed in now. His brain was showing the same flatline as the one who just died from falling asleep. The commander gave the order to seal the chamber with both subjects inside, as well as 3 researchers. One of the named 3 immediately drew out his gun and shot the commander point blank between his eyes, then turned the gun to the mute subject and blew his brain out as well. He pointed his gun at the remaining subject, still restrained to the bed, as the remaining members of the medical and research team fled the room. "I won't be locked in with these things. Not with you," he screamed as he strapped to the table. "What are you?" he demanded. "I must know." The subject smiled. "Have you forgotten so easily?" the subject asked. "We are you. We are the madness that lurks within you, begging to be freed every moment of your deepest animal mind. We are what hides from your bed. We are what you hide from in your beds every night. We are the sedated into silence and paralysis when you go into the nocturnal heavens where we cannot tread." The researchers paused, aimed the gun at the subject's heart, and fired. The EEG flatlined as the subject weakly choked out.
I like that one.
Nearly free.
So that's a good old classic right
And
there.
that's it. That's a
I
classic,
saw.
man. Like I
don't
read
know,
that. I read that
was
story
your
as a
mom or
kid,
something
and chills down my
walk
spine,
in,
man. Like
she was
that,
standing. I was
that
like,
I
"Dude,
wanted
we
to
want to
bring to our
pause?"
little show. It was amazing.
Okay, all right.
No, see,
All
see.
right.
I saw
Next
her
one.
come in, and I was like, I'm busy, you know.
One
No,
last
we're good.
trick or treat. Written by L. Chan. It's that time of year again. I know how I'm gonna be spending Halloween. Same way I have for the past 2 years, slowly nursing a beer in the bar, watching the glass sweat on that smooth wooden counter, staring at it till it goes warm in my hand. I'm not there to get drunk. I'm there to escape. I never want to be alone at home over Halloween night again. I promised the deputy that I wouldn't talk about that night. The town didn't need it. Hell, I even deleted the video. But now, with Halloween around the corner, it all comes back. Well, small town law enforcement doesn't care too much about the internet. I live in a small house at the end of the lane. Another nondescript house down a row of its sisters, prefabricated mostly, far enough off the beaten path to be cheap, not so far as to be rural, but close, pretty damn close. I didn't expect many kids to call around trick-or-treating come Halloween. It's a long road, and most children manage to fill their baskets long before they get to my place. Besides, I quite like the peace and quiet. Halloween used to be a good night to settle down and watch some of the classic horror movies on TV. I kept a couple of bags of candy around just in case some kids actually made it all the way down the lane, but mostly it would be an evening all to myself. I can't quite remember what I was watching that night, probably because I had been enjoying an after-dinner beer and I may have gotten carried away, dozing off after one too many. I woke with a start. My beer had gone warm on the side table. My hands still cold around the can. I winced as I unwrapped my fingers. Something had woken me up. The TV droned on in the background, the senseless drivel of late-night programming flickering across the room. Maybe it was just some high school kids out after some Halloween party out on the streets, making some noise that woke me up. I checked the time. Past midnight. I was glad I'd invested in a little security for my house. Just the basics, really. A good camera to cover my front lawn, motion-activated lights around the front and back. I was trying to make the tough decision of whether to clear up the mess right there and then, or just to kick the can down the road till the next morning when a loud rapping at the door shattered the silence. The can bounced off the floor, warm beer spraying across the bottom of my track pants. The shock left me too numb to even swear. I had just set the can back upright when the knocking sounded again. That arrhythmic rap increasingly impatient, the tempo building up as I stepped towards the door. I peered around the edge of the window. I saw nothing but my pale face in the glass. It was pitch dark outside. Why wasn't the light working? The knocking stopped. A tree branch, perhaps, or something else tapping on the porch. The people glared at me, the little glass orb suddenly bulging with some half-promised horror. I swallowed. Or I tried. My throat was dry, the warm beer on the floor suddenly inviting. "It's nothing," I said aloud, hoping the familiar echo of my voice off the walls would ground me somehow. I walked up to the door and peered out, only seeing the orange cones cast by the halogen streetlights a distance away. Nothing, I thought to myself, feeling childishly stupid. I sucked in a deep breath, feeling my lungs strain, then let the air stream out slowly. Then another knock. I turned back around to face the door. My heart punched at the inside of my chest. Its crazed dance playing counterpoint to the knocking. I wasn't surprised to see my hand shake as I reached for the doorknob. Our town was a safe one, far from the troubles of the big cities, or so we'd read in the papers. We had little more to fear in the night than seeing our trash strewn across the yard by nimble fingers of raccoons. I threw the door open. The porch lights winked on, suddenly blinding me. I blinked away the white spots from my vision. A pair of children stood on my porch. They must have been 9 or 10. I couldn't see much more of them because they were in the classic Halloween getup, a simple sheet draped over each of them, a pair of coals cut out for each of them to see through. A pair of small baskets for candy broke the smooth lines of the sheets. The toes of brand new dress shoes peeked out from under the sheets. A boy and a girl, I thought. Such a common refrain. I'd expected the words, but not the delivery. There were but 2 figures in front of me, yet their voices seemed to come from a great distance away. The pair spoke again. I felt a little discomforted at the distortion of their voices. More than the weird volume, their voices seemed to blend into each other's, with some strange harmonics at play at the edges. It seemed almost as though there was a choir of 2 just there speaking to me. Treat, I guess. I said. More than anything, I wanted those 2 away from my house. The whole situation felt wrong. The familiar veneer of the season concealing something deeper, something rotten. Like that small panic when biting into a fruit and feeling the lack of resistance. Your teeth sinking into soft mush instead of sweet flesh. For a moment, I blamed this haze of alcohol, the dregs of sleep clouding my judgment. But adrenaline had swept those far away. My fear was true. I turned to the counter where I kept my keys and grabbed for the bag of candy. I had prepared for the occasion. I was half hoping that the 2 figures would be gone when I returned to the door, that they'd been a figment of my imagination, perhaps a shadow of some dream brought on by cheap horror movies and cold pizza. I had no such luck. The pair hadn't moved an inch. They each raised their baskets. There was already an assortment of candy there. They'd had a good day. "A bit late for you guys to be out, isn't it? Where are your parents?" The only answer I got was an impatient shaking of baskets, the rasp of candy wrappers rustling. I held out a handful of candy, ready to drop it and call it a night. I expected to see a small pale hand clutching at the handle of the basket. Instead, I saw the anemic matte sheen of plastic. The basket was draped off the plastic hand of some kind of store mannequin. I was more than thoroughly creeped out by this effective little trick. I shrugged. Maybe the voices were recorded. A little technology to bolster an otherwise traditional costume. I felt the fear melting away as I explained it to myself in my head. Just some clever little children. Probably with the help of an adult. Smart, I thought. It had certainly gotten me going for a while. Stay safe, I told them, dropping the last of the candy into the baskets. They didn't acknowledge me. They just stood still on the worn wooden boards of my porch. I shut the door on them. The window darkened as the light on the porch shut off. Odd. Maybe the motion detection stopped working. Some unbidden instinct told me to stay there and wait. I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps on the porch as the two walked off. Still, the light stayed dark. My relief grew as the odd strangers left my property. Still, didn't sit right. Something didn't sit right. Something wasn't right. The light was working. It turned on when it detected me. It saw me. It didn't see the kids. The sensor was working. It was state-of-the-art. Passive infrared. Detected motion by detecting changes in the temperature like a human body. Like mine, but not the kids. Whatever was under those pristine white sheets wasn't warm at all. The realization washed over me, like an ice cube running down my spine. My breath came in short rasps. I had to see. I had to know. I could barely bring my hand to the curtains. They were shaking so bad. When I pinched the edge of the curtain between my thumb and my finger, the curtain began to undulate wildly. I filled my lungs and peered out through the glass. They were still there. Barely 20 yards away, doing nothing. Just standing there, motionless, facing the street. As I watched, they both swiveled their heads in perfect tandem to affix 2 pairs of fathomless eye holes on the window. There was no way. There was no way they could have seen me come to the window. I had to put the back of my hand in my mouth and bite down hard to keep from calling out. They knew. They knew I was there. I backed away from the window, dragging my leaden feet over the carpeted floor. I barely noticed when my heel knocked the can back. The beer leaked out onto the carpet, leaving a widening patch in front of me. I couldn't believe the raw, animal fear those two had summoned up in me. Every instinct I had in me told me to run. Run, get help. Anything but stay and be trapped in my own house. What could I do? Call the police and tell them that I was scared of 2 little children trick-or-treating? Call one of my friends past midnight and ask them to come over like a little boy crawling to his parents' room after a nightmare? The situation was ridiculous. My mind told me so. But there had to be a rational explanation for everything. But I could not explain away the light, fluttery feeling in my stomach. I could not rationalize the prickly lump at the back of my throat. They'd only said 3 words to me. In those unearthly tones. Who knew how cold those lips were? I shut the door to the kitchen, the sound echoing through the empty house. I turned my chair to face the front door, and then I waited, white-knuckled, for the dawn to come. I must have fallen asleep sometime during that long, cold wait, not daring to move from my chair, paralyzed with fear that one of those shrouded children would appear at my window, or worse yet, behind me. But even that manic store of energy wore out as the night wound to a close. I was woken up by a polite knock on the front door. I sat bolt upright, nearly falling off my chair. I stumbled to the door, a hint of the dread from a few hours ago still lingering like a stale funk in the air. I checked the peephole again. This time I was confronted with the well-scrubbed face of one of our town deputies. We'd been to school together. It was that kind of smallish town where you'd know almost everybody your age if they had a history there. He was an earnest man, tough but fair. "Good morning, officer." "Morning," he replied. The sour look on his face told me that it was anything but that. His nose twitched as he took in the stale, sour smell of beer steaming off the floor in the morning sun. "Had a good night last night?" I thought back to the night before. No, I didn't. The lawman was quick to see the fleeting shadow of doubt wash across my face. He pressed home his advantage. "You care to explain why you stole the 2 mannequins from the store, dress them up, and put them on your lawn. He shifted to the side and past his door filling bulk, I saw two familiar shapes on my lawn. My lungs wouldn't fill with air. They were still there. They'd been there the whole time. "You okay, buddy?" The big man leaned in, blocking my view and steadying my shoulder with one of his strong hands. I brushed his hand off and lurched out into the yard, mindless of the freezing dew on my bare feet. The pair stood there, the draped sheets joining between them. They were holding hands. The two of them were holding hands. I brought my palm down gingerly on the head of the one nearer to me. Hard. I felt hard plastic. I whipped the sheet off with one smooth motion. I gave a strangled cry as I stared into the empty green eyes of a child mannequin. I backed away. Too quick. I ended up on my ass on the cold grass, clawing and scrambling backwards until I bumped into the solid legs of the deputy behind me. He'd been quick to recognize my unease earlier. He was just as quick to realize my genuine fear. He hoisted me back to my feet and helped me back into my house. "Mind telling me what all that was about?" He dumped me on the office chair in front of my computer. I tried, but I couldn't force the words out. The deputy sighed and settled onto my couch, wrinkling his nose at the empty beer cans on the side table. He leaned forward. "First call of the morning after Halloween, and I'm chasing down some bullshit break-in to a store in the middle of town. Now I've got you hungover and scared shitless from a damn pair of dolls in your front yard. What I know is someone got into a store, smashed up the glass, stole sheets and a couple of mannequins. Bloody kids again. Except the glass..." The lines in his brow deepened. I watched his Adam's apple bob up and down. The glass was on the outside of the shop only. The damnedest thing. "You've got a camera in your yard, don't you?" I nodded, numbly. "What say you give me another 10 minutes of your time, tops? We'll go through that footage. I see who put those things in your lawn, and then I'll be out of your life, hopefully for good." I turned to face my computer and called up the stored videos on my hard drive. They were all transferred by Wi-Fi. Convenient for the time that I bought the cameras. "Just put on double speed backwards. We'll see who set them there soon enough." I hit the reverse play key and upped the speed. I saw the two of us scuttle from the house to the lawn and back again. Then the first rays of sun retreating from the grass, pulling back over the pair of figures until they were back in darkness. The two of them stood there, motionless, for the longest time. When the two figures moved, all by themselves, in a jerky, swaying motion, back from my lawn to my front door, the cursor danced a little jig in the corner of the screen as the shakes returned, stronger than before. The sharp hiss behind me told me I wasn't alone in my discomfort. I shuddered as I watched myself on the screen, so close to the two abominations, giving them a handful of candy each. I slowed the recording back to normal speed. On screen, I saw myself turn back into the house to retrieve the candy. The two figures stood there, impassive. As one, they both fixed those dark eye holes on the sheets on the camera. There was something else unmistakable. There was a slight pulse in the sheets, a small undulation. The mannequins were breathing. "I've seen enough." I turned to look at the deputy, his face as white as the sheets on the shrouded figures on screen, his hand tight around the grip of his sidearm. That, of all things, scared me most of all. A symbol of law and order who had seen the worst of what our little community had to offer, just as scared as I was and ready to pull a gun in my house. I clicked the window shut and got up. I wandered over to my cabinet. I pulled out a pair of tumblers and a bottle of the good stuff. The bottle gave a couple of contented glugs as I sloshed the rich golden whiskey into the glasses. I set one down in front of the other man and took a sip from my glass. A lawman could lose his job drinking on duty. The deputy didn't hesitate when he emptied half his glass. He didn't look at me when he spoke. "My old Nan wasn't from around here. She was back from the old country, across the sea. She hated Halloween. So there were things out that night that weren't meant to see the light of day. One night a year, she told me, for one single night, some things were set loose. The candy and costumes were a new thing back in the past. On All Hallows Eve, good folk crossed themselves and prayed and stayed in. Whatever's on that recording, it's not what our town needs. You understand? Dumb high school kids, I said, the lie taking shape and form in my mouth. Fooling around, the lie fleshed out, took on a veneer of credibility. That would be the explanation. No one had to know the dark kernel of that story. And your camera. It was having technical difficulties that night. Never was a good piece of equipment. I regretted buying it the same week. He stuck out his hand and we shook on it. And I have kept my word to now. There isn't a good reason why I broke my promise. I'd never known true fear until that night, but I replay it in my head, over and over. The recording is long gone, of course, but every detail of that night has been branded on my mind. I remember the fear, but I cannot think of a single action the two of them had done to threaten me. Eerie, unnatural, but without a drop of malice. It'll be Halloween soon. I know where I'll be on that dark night. Some things roam the streets that shouldn't be there. The masks and costumes aren't always for the children. Sometimes they're there for the adults, for our own protection. After the deputy left, I watched the video forwards just once. I remember seeing the two figures on my lawn slowly inching their hands up, locking them under the sheets and waiting for the sun to rise. Things that shouldn't be out on this good earth. But sometimes, just sometimes, they just want the simple things, like one last trick or treat. And that's it.
Ooh, chills, literal chills. All right. So, SmileDog, Creepypasta, once again, no author. I first met in person with Mary E. in summer of 2007. I had arranged with her husband, 15 years, Terrence, to see her for an interview. Mary had initially agreed, since I wasn't a newsman but rather an amateur writer gathering information for a few college assignments and, if all went according to plan, some pieces of fiction. We scheduled the interview for a particular weekend when I was in Chicago to unrelated business, but at the last moment Mary changed her mind and locked herself in the couple's bedroom. I refused to meet with her, and refused to meet with me. For half an hour, I sat with Terrence as we camped outside the bedroom door. I listened and taken notes while he attempted to fruitlessly to calm his wife. The things Mary said made little sense, but fit with the pattern I was expecting. Though I could not see her, I could tell from her voice that she was crying, and more often than not, her objection to speaking with me was concerned around the incoherent the attribute on her dreams, her nightmare. Terrence apologized profusely when we ceased the exercise, and I did my best to take it in strides. I recall that I wasn't a reporter in search of a story, but merely a curious young man in search of information. Besides, I thought at the time I could perhaps find another similar case if I put my mind and resources to it. Mary E. was the CISOP of a small Chicago bulletin board system in 1992 when she first encountered Smile.Jpg, and her life changed forever. She and Terrence had been married for only 5 months. Mary was only an estimated 4,000 people who saw the image when it was posted as a hyperlink on the BBS. Though she is the only one who had spoken openly about the experience. The rest had remained anonymous or perhaps dead. In 2007, when I was in 10th grade, Smile.Jpg was first brought to my attention by a begrudging interest in web-based phenomenon. Mary was the most often cited victim of what it was sometimes referred to as Smile.Dog. that being Smile.Jpg, as reputed to displayed. What caught my interest, other than the obvious Maccabee elements of the cyber legend and my provocated towards such things, was the sheer lack of information, usually to the point where people don't believe it exists, other than as a humorous or hoax. It was unique because though the entire phenomenon centered in a picture file, that file is nowhere to be found in the internet. Certainly, many photo manipulated simulacra litter the web, showing up in the most frequency of sites such as image boards on 4chan, particularly the X-Focus Paranormal subboard. It is suspected that these are fakes because they do not have the effect of the true Smile.Jpg is believed to have, namely the sudden onset temporal lobe epilepsy and acute anxiety. These reported reactions in the viewers is one of the reasons the phantom-like Smile.Jpg is regarded with such disdain, since it is patently absurd. Though depending on who you ask, the reluctance to acknowledge Smile.Jpg existence might be just as much of fear as it is out of disbelief. Neither Smile.Jpg nor SmileDog is mentioned anywhere in Wikipedia, though the website features articles on such other, perhaps more scandalous shock site as Hello.Jpg or Two Girls One Cup. Any attempt to create a page particularly pertaining to Smile.Jpg is deleted by any of the encyclopedia's many admins. Encounters with Smile.Jpg are the stuff of internet legends. Mary's E story is not unique. There are unverified rumors of Smile.Jpg showing up in early days of the onset, and even one persistent tale that in 2007 a hacker flooded the forums of humor and satire websites with something awful, with a deluge of Smile.Jpg pictures, rendering almost half of the forum's users at the time epileptic. It is also said that that in the mid to late 1990s, the Smile.Jpg circulated the onset and as an attachment of a chain email with the subject line, "Smile, God gives you love." Yet despite the huge exposures these stunts would generate, there are very few people who admit to having experienced any of them, and no trace of the file or any link has ever been discovered. Those who claim to have seen Smile.Jpg often weekly joke that they were far too busy to save a copy of the pictures in their hard drive. However, an alleged victim offers the same description of the photo. A dog-like creature, usually described as appearing similar to a Siberian husky, illuminated by the flash of the camera, sits in a dim room. The only background detail is visible of a human being hand extending from the darkest near left of the side of the frame. The hand is empty, but it's usually described as beckoning, of course. Most attention is given to the dog or creature or dog-like creature, as some victims are more certain than others about what they claim to have seen. The muzzle of the beast is reportedly split with a wide grin, revealing two rows of very white, very straight, very sharp, very human-looking teeth. This is, of course, not the description given immediately after viewing the picture, rather it's a recollection of the victim, who claim to have seen the picture endlessly repeated in their mind's eyes during the time they were, in reality, having epileptic fits. These fits are reported to continue indeterminately, often while the victim sleeps, resulting in very vivid and disturbing nightmares. These may be treated with medication, though sometimes it is effective on others more than it is on others. Mary E, I assumed, was not on effective medication. This was why when I visited her apartment in 2007, I sent out feelers for several folklores and urban legends oriented newsgroups, websites, and mailing lists, hoping to find the name of the supposed victim of Smile.Jpg who felt more interested in talking about his experience. For a time, nothing happened, and at length I forgot completely about my pursuits since I began freshman year in college and was quite busy. Mary contacted me via email, however, near the beginning of March of 2008. Email from Mary E. Dear Mr. L, I am incredibly sorry for my behavior last summer when you came to interview me. I hope you understand that it was not a fault of yours. but rather my own problems that led me to act out as I did. I realized that I could have handled the situation more decorously. However, I hope you will forgive me. At the time, I was afraid. You see, for 15 years I have been hunted by Smile.Jpg, or SmileDog. Comes to me in my sleep every night. I know that it sounds silly, but it is true. There is an ineffable quality about my dreams, my nightmares, that make them completely unlike the real dreams I have ever seen. I do not move, I do not speak. I simply look ahead, and the only thing ahead of is the scene from the horrible picture. I see the beckoning hand. I see the Smile.Dog. It talks to me. It is not a dog, of course, though I'm not quite sure what it really is. It tells me it will leave me alone if I do as it asks. All I must do, it says, is spread the word. That is how it phrases its demands, and I know exactly what it means and wants me to show it to someone else. And I could. The week after my incident, I received in the mail a manila envelope with no return address. Inside was only a 3 by 3 and 3 by half inch floppy diskette. Without having it checked, I knew precisely what it was. I thought for a long time about my options. I could show it to a stranger, a coworker. I could even show it to Terrence. As much as the idea disgusted me, and what would happen then? Well, if Smile.Jpg kept its word, I could sleep. Yet, if it lied, what would I do? And who was to say something worse was not to come from me if I had done as the creature asked? So, I did nothing for 15 years, though I kept the diskette hidden amongst my things. Every night for 15 years, Smile.Dog has come to me in my sleep and demanded that I spread the word. For 15 years I have stood strong, though there have been hard times. Many of my fellow victims in the BBS boards were the first encounters of Smile.Jpg and stopped posting. I heard some of them committed suicide, others remained completely silent and just simply disappeared off the face of the web. They were the ones I worry about the most. I sincerely hope you will forgive me, Mr. L. But last summer, when you contacted me and my husband about the interview, I was near the breaking point. I decided I was going to give you the floppy diskette. I did not care if Smile.Jpg was lying or not. I wanted it to end. You were a stranger, someone I had no connections with, and I thought I would feel no sorrow if I handed you the diskette as part of your research and sealed your fate. Before you arrived, I realized what I was doing. I was plotting to ruin your life. I could not stand the thought. In fact, I still cannot. I am ashamed, Mr. L, and I hope this warning will dissuade you from further investigation of Smile.Jpg. You may in time encounter someone who is, if not weaker than I, then wholly more depraved, someone who will not hesitate to follow Smile.Dog's orders. Stop while you're still whole. Sincerely, Mary E. Terrence contacted me later that month with the news that his wife had killed herself. While cleaning the various things she left behind, closing emails, accounts, and stuff like that, he happened upon the above message. He was a man of shambles. He wept as he told me to listen to his wife's advice. He found a diskette. He revealed and burned it until it was nothing but a stinking pile of blackened plastic. The part that was most disturbing to him, however, was that the diskette has hissed as it melted, like some sort of animal, he said. I will admit that I was a little uncertain about how to respond to this. At first, I thought perhaps it was a joke, with the couples blatantly playing with the situation in order to get a rise from me. A quick check of several Chicago newspapers' online obituaries, however, proved that Mary E. was indeed dead. There was, of course, no mention of suicide in the article. I decided for a time at least, I would not further pursue the subject of Smile.Jpg, especially since I had finals coming up at the end of May. But the world has an odd way of testing us. Almost a full year after I'd returned home from a disastrous interview with Mary E., I received another email. To L. from Elizabeth. Hello, I found your email address through your mailing list. Your profile said you were interested in SmileDog. I have saw it, and it's not as bad as everyone on the online says it is. Here I am, just spreading the word. The final line chilled me to the bone. According to my email client, there was a file attachment, naturally, called Smile.Jpg. I considered downloading it for some time. It was most likely a faked image, I imagine, and even if it weren't, I was never wholly convinced of Smile.Jpg's particular powers. Mary E's account had shaken me, yes, but she was probably mentally unbalanced anyways. After all, how could a simple image with Smile.Jpg just do what people say it could accomplish? What sort of creature was it that it could break one's mind with only the power of the eye? And if such things were patently absurd, then why did the legend exist at all? If I download the image, if I look at it, and if Mary turned out to be correct, if Smile.Dog came to me in my dreams, demanded that I spread the word, what would I do? Would I live my life as Mary had, fighting against the urge to give it until I die? Or would I simply spread the word, eager to put this to rest? And if I chose the latter route, how could I do it? Whom would I burden in turn? If I went through with my earlier intentions to write a short article about Smile.Jpg, I decided I could attach it as evidence, and anyone who read the article, anyone who took interest, would be affected. And even assuming a Smile.Jpg's attached to the email was genuine, would I be capricious enough to save myself in that manner? Could I spread the word? Yes.
It's another one I haven't heard
Yes, I
in a
could.
long time.
The end. Ooh. Oh man, that one was good, man. That one was good. I have a I haven't seen the image in forever, and I look at it
To the vid.
as I was doing research for this
That'd
thing,
be
and
fun.
oh my god, that shit was terrifying.
Okay.
I'll probably add it to
This
the video
one
in the editing process.
It's
Yeah.
called Awaiting
Exactly.
Input,
Alright, go, my good
written
sir.
by Jackson Barnard. Computer, wake up. The green static flickered to on the face of the monitor. The computer system of the ship never completely shuts down, but is occasionally requested to sleep during long periods of inactivity. Red lights flared on and off as the backup generators designated all available power to emergency functions. All hands are on deck, including Mason Straightwater, the ship's head of engineering, except there aren't many hands on deck. In fact, Mason hasn't seen another person since waking up to the sirens and clambering down to the ship's mainframe computer to assess damages and find out what on earth was happening. After several agonizing seconds, the static gave way to green binary numbers, and finally a single horizontal green line. This green line shifted and morphed into two words, which were almost immediately repeated by the computer's text-to-speech function. Awaiting input. Mason leaned forward near the monitor and spoke his command clearly. Computer, what happened? Milliseconds later, the computer spat forth its reply. Please provide name and rank. Mason wiped a hand over his face and brow. I don't have time for this, he thought. But he knew he had to comply with the computer's algorithm. Name and rank first and foremost. This was the way the computer knows who is talking to and what certain classified information it must conceal to lower-ranked personnel. Mason Straightwater, head of engineering. A pause, then green lines transformed into words, and semantics as the computer spat out its ensuing reply. Straightwater, M, head of engineering. Station, sector 2. Greetings.
How may I be of service?
How may I be of service? Computer, the ship is currently under emergency protocol. What the hell happened? A pause, and then the ship, SSE Sentinel, is under emergency protocol, F6, reserved for all breaches and hostile beings on board. Current status of Sentinel. Severe hull breach in Sector 7. Sector 6. On the onboard starboard bow. All entrances and means of access to Sector 6 are closed off. Possible hostiles have boarded the ship. Please proceed with emergency evacuation protocol T1.
Abandon ship immediately. Via life Sector 3.
Leave everything behind. The computer stopped abruptly, obviously done with its analysis. Mason was not satisfied. The entire situation didn't add up. Where was everyone else in the evacuation? Why wasn't he roused from his sleep by another engineer or his CO? Mason couldn't leave the room just yet. He still had some questions for the computer. Computer, where is everyone? What happened to the crew of the SSE Sentinel? A longer pause. The computer would never take this long to answer such a simple question as taking inventory of crew members. Finally, the computer blipped out and scrolled out its sinister answer. There are 22 life forms currently alive on the ship. Mason sat back, horrified. This was impossible. Out of the entire ship's crew of over 1,500, only 22 remained. Did everyone else already evacuate, and the rest haven't received the evac news yet? No, there was some other factor in the equation. He just couldn't see it. Whatever was going down, whatever had set off the alarms and emergency protocol within the ship, it was far from anything Mason had received in his training. This is too far above my pay grade, he thought. The computer blipped again, and Mason realized it wasn't done. Of the previous 1,492 staff and crew of the SSC Sentinel, two remain alive. Mason's blood ran cold, too shocked to speak. He sat dumbfounded facing the computer. This wasn't happening, he thought. This isn't possible. 2 people remain. Me and some other poor chump left behind on the ship. But if it's just us 2, where the hell are the other 20? The computer clicked, and more green words popped up on the monitor. Correction to your previous query, Mr. Straightwater. There are currently 21 life forms on the ship. One surviving member of the SSE Sentinel remains. Mason's sanity was slipping by the second. The underlying implications of that statement was too horrifying to mull over. He needed to act fast, and he needed to know what exactly he was up against. Computer, he ordered, bring up all available ship security feeds in Sector 6. Request processed and acknowledged. In place of the grainy green static, several monitors split the screen and showed the crushing carnage. Mason bore witness to motionless bodies, some fully intact, others with vicious lacerations, the rest having been utterly ripped apart. He switched from camera to camera. Each perspective held the image of his deceased crew members. As he panned to the crew quarters, it seemed that some people had died in their sleep. Others were still in a still motion pose as they attempted to claw their way out of the door. Some had suffocated, some had hideous wounds, some had tried to fight back, but all 1,500 crew members were dead. At length, Mason requested the monitors for each sector, scouting each area one by one, hopelessly searching for the inhuman entities that caused this chaos. It wasn't until he flipped through Sector 9 that he had finally saw them. There were only 2 of them in the image, but it was enough for Mason to fully comprehend exactly what he was dealing with. To call them human would be insultingly inaccurate. Hunched, dark bodies dwarfed every detail of the corridor, their leathery, grotesque heads nearly reaching the ceiling. They shuffled with cartoonish swiftness, as if whatever action they took was sped up to 3 times the normal rate. Their legs moved unsettlingly, barely leaving the ground and scuttling close to their hideous bodies before the next leg repeated the same process. They looked like bipedal spiders, momentarily pausing and then clambering through doors and air vents. Their lanky arms extended from their upper midsection and scraped the ground, dragging along with them protracted and lengthy talons glistening with the remains of the fallen. Mason horridly observed that there were only 2 creatures he was able to catch on camera throughout the entire facility. He had no idea where the other 18 might be patrolling. A thud and shuffling of movement outside the cramped room gave him his answer. It came from nowhere, the scuttling sound of hollow limbs on metallic frames, but it rose so frightfully and suddenly from the void outside the computer room, and it was drawing ever closer with alarming speed. Mason quickly turned his attention back to the monitor. "Computer," he barked. "Shut down mainframe access doors immediately." Request acknowledged. The single door leading to the computer room shut and locked with a synthetic hiss. Moments later, the small peephole on the door darkened, and Mason had a grim feeling as to why. The monsters were here to claim their final victim. Mason regarded his sinister foe intently. The face that had stared blankly back at him held no features, no eyes, no mouth, not even a nose or some unearthly proboscis. Just a stark, leathery face. He's seen the bloodshed over the security cameras. He knows that these creatures could open the fragile door with ease and get into this room. There's been evidence of forceful break-ins all over the ship. It could take minutes, maybe even seconds if several of them worked together. But they'd be in the room to finish the job. But the creature continued to stare at Mason. It's waiting, he thought. It's waiting for me to do something, but what? Another blip brought Mason's attention back to the computer. The mainframe access door has been sealed shut. However, this action will hinder your attempt to evacuate. Perhaps I may offer an alternative? Computer, what are those things outside this room? Mason pressed. Why are they here? What do they want from me? He was beginning to become unstable, unhinged even. The entire facade of his life was falling all around him, and the protective curtains enveloping his idea of normalcy has been engulfed in flames. Processing life forms. Please stand by. Species unknown. Genus unknown. Family unknown. Order carnivora. Class unknown. Phylum chordata. Kingdom Animalia. Analysis. These are hostile creatures capable of immense strengths and should be regarded with utmost caution. Danger levels measured at an average 9.8. A long pause followed. Mason shot a quick glance to the grimy, glassy peephole. The same wrinkled gray face stared back at him, or at least it looked the same. At length the figure moved its gangly body to the right, only to be replaced by another disgusting face from the left side. There were more out there. Mason continued to stare for unending seconds in dreadful and mortal fascination. The computer beeped, and Mason returned to the task at hand, just as the face at the door was replaced again with another face. As for your second query, Mr. Straightwater, I can tell you exactly why they are here. But first, I presume you would like to know what they require from you. The tone and inflection of the computer had changed abruptly. Something's not right with any of this, thought Mason. Indeed, there was something sinister with the computer program aboard the SSE Sentinel. For when the next message rolled out, the monitor changed from green static to a dark reddish clarity. No longer was the monitor full of grainy static. It was now clear and bold as the blood from the bodies of the crew.
They require to bear witness.
Bear witness to what? Mason stammered. To the absolute horrors that exist outside the ship's walls, replied the program. For far too long, mankind has lived on this rock of solid called Earth. He has looked up at the night sky from time to time and wondered what lay beyond the stars. As religion gave way to science, man has shifted his thoughts from the idea that life outside his planet was impossible to a distinct possibility. But years later, after decades of space exploration and colonization, man has not found any significant evidence of alien life till now. The computer continued. Mason Straightwater, I implore you not to take this situation personally. Although I am nothing more than a machine learning algorithm, I fully comprehend human nature and the horror you must be feeling now. You were the unfortunate sample that stumbled too far out of the reach of the Solar Council's jurisdiction. You and your crew have stumbled upon something sinister, something you have never seen before nor were ever prepared to handle. Mason was at a loss for words. A rhythmic, wet slap drummed slowly from the closed door. The creatures were impatient and wanted to get in, but not as impatient as to force the door open. They seemed to have been tasked with explicit instructions to stand by and wait a little longer. Mason soon found his voice. You're telling me you're with them? Those things? This whole time you've been leading this ship into a suicide mission? That is not a fair assumption to make, the computer coyly replied. My systems are currently not, and by extension have never been, under the influence of any foreign entity or virus of any kind. I have always been on the side of the crew. Trust me. How can I trust something that just had my entire crew slaughtered like sheep? Mason's temper wavered in light of this new information. Understandably, I do not expect you to accept the current circumstances you find yourself in. Perhaps, with time, my intentions will become clearer. Your intentions? What is this? What is your part in all of this? Where the hell do you fit in this rogue scheme? Simple. My algorithm was manufactured by man to benefit man. My main and most absolute prerogative function is this: to preserve the life and well-being of humans. My second prerogative is to ensure the safety of the crew. But that role could be deemed void if my primary function must be first and foremost. The computer clicked and whirred, and Mason looked up from the monitor as the door let out a mechanical hiss. The door to the computer room had opened up, and Mason saw the absolute terrifying might of the monsters. They slithered in, one by one, into the small room. Only 3 were able to fit inside the room, but Mason saw there were more outside, far more. Their backs hunched severely to accommodate their massive size. Their heads brushed against the ceiling. Good God, Mason thought. They must be at least 3 meters tall. Mason reached and placed a hand on his holster, inches away from his gun, ready to fight if any of them made a sudden move. Yet they all stood idly by. They were waiting again, waiting for a signal from the computer. The monitor flickered and blinked, whirring and clicking and clacking, and finally sending out a solitary blip to return Mason's attention back. Do not be afraid, Mason. They will not kill you. You will not die by their hands. However, I cannot guarantee you will leave this place in one piece. Mason was not about to go down without a fight. Then what the hell do they want from me, you asshat program? I've already answered your question. They wish for you to be a witness. God damn it, a witness for what? They wish for you to give your testimony to the rest of mankind. They wish for you to tell everyone of the human race the truth. There is life out in space, and they want nothing to do with you. The monitor winked and turned off. Mason whipped out his gun from its holster as the creatures lunged for him. He let off 2 shots before he was enveloped by the hellish monstrosities and screamed as they bore down on him like feral animals. A news flash report released by the Solar Council of Greater Earth. The SSC Sentinel was found floating in the outskirts of the Sagittarius Quadrant by authorities earlier this week. Police and the Galactic Guard found each and every member of the ship's crew, every one of them deceased on site, all except one. They identified the lone survivor as a Mason Douglas Straightwater, the ship's head of engineering. He was found unconscious, his body a mess of wounds, cuts, and contusions. Doctors later were able to revive and repair his emaciated body, but his mental health had deteriorated drastically. According to his doctors, Straightwater, quote, kept babbling on about a witness, and they want nothing to do with us, end quote. Official reports state that Straightwater was admitted to the Ares Mental Institution for further examinations and further recuperations. It will be a long time before he can be healed completely. Authorities examined every corpse on the ship, all of them in some form of rigor mortis. The state of death differed from one individual to the next. The cause of death differed from one individual to the next. On occasion, not even fingerprint data or DNA samples were enough to identify the bodies. Throughout the entire investigation, one factor stood out from the rest and baffled authorities to no end. What caused this mayhem? A hull breach and forceful break-in was evident on the ship, but no hostile entities were sensed or found aboard. Later, in the police report, the lone survivor, Straightwater, had been found in the ship's mainframe computer room. Next to his body, the computer was on and running, oddly enough. Throughout the entire time they were on board the ship, the Galactic Guard reported in their classified files that the monitor held 2 words behind the grainy green static: awaiting input. The end.
Ooh. Woo! That was nice. That was nice. I like this. I like this. This is a good Halloween special.
Halloween special. Do you want to? I don't know what we want to do next week, but I kind of want to do some more Halloween related stuff.
Yeah, 100%.
Do we want to talk about like our what do we want to talk about next week?
Because next week is not Halloween. No, it's Halloween's Eve, and then no. Next week.
7 days from now. It's the 20th.
Yeah. Yeah. 2 more weeks. 2 more weeks. So we still got 2 more weeks of Halloween specials. What can we do?
We could do like Halloween, like I don't know about horror movies, but like Halloween movies, like Halloween, like cartoon specials, or like specials that we used to watch as a kid, or like Halloween movies, like movies centered around or adjacent to the actual holiday of Halloween. It could be like it could still be a horror movie, but still having like those
just a bigger net.
Yeah, bigger net, like the Halloween based or adjacent movies.
That sounds that sounds good. Halloween specials about like as you can see over here, the Treehouse of Horror.
Treehouse of Horror.
So yeah. Halloween special. That does sound pretty good, and just bigger now, so we can talk about anything Halloweenish. All right, perfect.
Yeah, we can just kind of keep, and I don't know, we probably, you and I probably won't boil it down to just like one each, but I do have like a couple things that I want to talk about regarding Halloween and specials and stuff like that. Like you can talk about Treehouse of Horror, because unfortunately, I'm not a super huge Simpsons guy, so I have not seen. I don't think I've seen a single Treehouse of Horror episode. So maybe that's maybe we go through all those and you kind of fill me in on those. And tell me why you like them.
I'll fill you in. I got you, bro.
Harder
got
daddy.
You. The harder daddy. Ooh. All right. That sounds like a play.
Yeah, that was a good one. I liked it. It was a good throwback with yours, and I wanted to. I was gonna do initially. I was gonna do like all 3 cosmic horror or space related ones, but then I thought, let's change it up.
A little bit of variety.
I was gonna do like a dark horror parody, like a dark comedy sort of thing.
Right.
Like a darkly humorous one. But I was like, maybe not. But
I like the Firefly one. Like it brought me back to the as I told you, the Berserk scene. Like as soon as you started talking about the fireflies and the red eyes, my initial my brain went to the scene where like all the Berserk fucking butterflies or fucking fairies or whatever the fuck they are. They're having like the mock battle scene. Like that's what my brain went to, bro.
all the fairies.
Yeah.
I was, and like, I had just skimmed that one, and I was just like, all right, we'll just do this one. But as I was reading it, I kind of like, I was like, this is a really like demented version of Grave of the Fireflies.
Yeah. That's where my brain went, bro. It was crazy as fuck. That was like an hour. What the fuck? It's crazy.
I have like an hour 30, but technically I did stop my I stopped my recording for like 2 minutes because I was waiting for you to like acknowledge your mom or something behind you, and I was like, I stopped it, and I was like, do we want to stop real quick so you can say something? And then I pause it.
She was not being acknowledged.
Yeah, no, I'll splice everything together and I'll make it fit. But I just gotta put space back into my track. But yeah, that was fun. I really liked it.
Yeah, that was a great one. I liked that one a lot. So it was nice reading and reminiscing.
Yeah, it was. Unless you've got anything else.
No, that's it. That's it. We just came over here to read the stories, so that's
This
pretty fun.
is gonna be a long one to edit because I gotta go back through and edit out any pauses, stops, or any shit like that.
Yeah. Take your time. Take your time. Take your time. Trust me. But yeah, I like that one. And you wanna call it?
Yeah, let's call it.
All right. Let me know when to. Unless you want to do an outro.
All right, boys. Thanks for listening. Keep liking, commenting, subscribing. You know, I don't really care about all that stuff, but it does.
It does help.
Does help.
It does help.
Recommend, share, please. I might even start posting these on my. I don't know if we should make
I think we should just for clips.
Just
like
for
an
clips?
Instagram or something. Yeah.
Like an Instagram?
Yeah.
You think we
like
should?
clips and stuff like that. 100%, bro. 100%.
Okay.
If we want this to like reach other people, then we definitely should.
Poster out there and start sharing. Okay.
That sounds great.
Okay. Well, thanks guys for listening again. We appreciate you. Have a very safe and spooky Halloween season. It's not quite Halloween, but you know, keep up the spooky vibes.
Yeah, and be safe and don't drink and don't take no razor blade apples, bro.
Yeah, well, that's not a thing anymore.
Oh, hey, bro, I threw it back. Who knows who else can too?
Bringing it back.
All right. Yeah, my God. All right.
Bye.
Bye.